Happy Thursday to you. Here's what you might have missed. The frantic international search for the missing tourist submersible entered a more desperate phase today as rescuers feared that the oxygen supply on the vessel had run out. But the search for the Titan, which went missing Sunday after embarking on a mission to survey the wreckage of the Titanic, had been focused on an area where Canadian aircraft detected underwater noises Tuesday and again yesterday. But unfortunately, the Coast Guard said today that a debris field was found in the search of the area, and OceanGate issued a statement around noon Pacific Standard Time today, saying that they believe that all 5 people on board had perished. After news broke about yet another Supreme Court ethics scandal, this time revelations that Justice Samuel Alito went on a lavish vacation with a billionaire GOP donor and failed to recuse himself from multiple cases involving that very same donor. Senator Dick Durbin, an Illinois Democrat and chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, has announced that the committee will vote next month on legislation to create enforceable ethics requirements for Supreme Court justices. ProPublica reports that in 2008, hedge fund billionaire and GOP donor Paul Singer flew Justice Alito to Alaska on a private jet, which ProPublica estimated would have cost Alito over $100,000 if he had chartered the plane himself. Alito did not disclose that gift. He also did not later recuse himself from ruling on cases involving Singer's businesses. Those cases were worth billions of dollars to Singer. Amid his legal woes this past spring, Donald Trump lived as usual at his members-only Palm Beach club, Mar-a-Lago, and according to a source, he found company in Republican conspiracy theorist Kari Lake, who has been spotted frequently at the club in recent months. Lake, a former news anchor who lost her bid for Arizona governor and, like Trump, claimed that the election was rigged against her, spent a significant portion of her time at Mar-a-Lago during its open season. And Kari Lake, according to that source, is there, quote unquote, all the time. And quote unquote, there's a suite there that she practically lives in. Tensions between far-right reps Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia and Lauren Boebert of Colorado boiled over onto the House floor yesterday as Boebert tried unsuccessfully to force a vote on her resolution to impeach President Joe Biden. During the vote on the resolution yesterday afternoon, Greene and Boebert had a testy exchange on the floor, according to the Daily Beast. Boebert approached Greene and confronted her about statements Greene had made about her, and Greene then called Boebert, quote unquote, a little b, and accused Boebert of having copied articles of impeachment that she filed against Joe Biden. Basically saying, why are you copying my impeachment? A spokesperson for Marjorie Taylor Greene confirmed to NBC News that the outlet's characterization of the interaction was accurate. And the Supreme Court seems destined to end affirmative action, a big rollback of the tool colleges employ to boost racial diversity on their campuses. What's unclear is how schools fashion race-neutral workarounds to fill that gap, or if the ruling pushes colleges to retreat on a goal that's been a priority for decades. If race-conscious submissions fall, some better resourced schools are expected to use household incomes, zip codes, and targeted recruiting programs and other indirect methods to prop up their commitment to diversity. But among the 9 states that banned the practice at their colleges years ago, those schools don't present many lessons on how to boost the number of Black and brown students without affirmative action. When we come forward, we are going to be talking to historian, researcher, and radio host Michael Imhotep about reparations and about Juneteenth and how Juneteenth can be a tool to teach about reparations. Very much looking forward to this conversation with Michael Imhotep when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is a rather bold pronouncement, but we think we can back it up. If you come across a radio frequency anywhere putting more variety and more diversity on the air than KBLA Talk 1580, we sure would like to hear about your discovery.
You got to have vision.
You can search, but we are confident that you won't find more shows covering more topics, hosted by a more diverse and inclusive lineup of talkers than the squad we have assembled here at KBLA Talk 1580.
This is the time, brothers. This is the time.
We've got something for everybody.
That's right.
Health and healing, history and humor, issues and events, empowerment and entertainment, all in one station.
What's really going on?
Free enterprise, you dig?
KBLA Talk 1580.
Yes.
Oh yeah. We got a lot to talk about.
King Kong ain't got on me.
If you're not listening to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings on KBLA Talk 1580, you're missing out. Everybody wants to talk to Tavis.
That's one reason, by the way, why I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with you today. The three people I always most hoped would interview me were Phil Donahue, Studs Terkel, and Tavis Smiley. Donahue's retired, Terkel's deceased, so this is a real thrill for me. And the reason why I have such respect for what you do is you have a historically informed conversation of depth and detail.
Be sure to tune in to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings, 9 a.m. to 12 noon on your unapologetically progressive radio station, KBLA Talk 1580. KBLA Talk 1580.
Is the pen mightier than the sword?
They say the pen is mightier than the sword. At KBLA Talk 1580, we not only have a lot to talk about, we have a lot to write about. Politics, relationships, business, empowerment, and culture. The all-star roster at KBLA Talk 1580 has you covered.
That's what it's all about.
Be sure to follow us on all our socials for our latest book releases, op-eds, essays, and commentaries from our hosts. And, of course, download the KBLA 1580 app as we strive to remain your most trusted, credible, and reliable source for the issues you care about. This is unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
What up, baby?
There are millions of boys and girls who are young, gifted, and black.
I'm young, gifted, and
With a
black.
golden tag. And that's a fact.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
Hey there, I'm Jared Hill, president of the National Association of Black Journalists of Los Angeles, and I just want to say thank you for the benevolent $10,000 donation and scholarships for the next generation of black journalists.
And I'm Haywood Galbraith, photojournalist and founder of the Minority Photojournalism Institute. Thanks, KBLA, for your generous $10,000 scholarship gift to help us train the next generation of black photojournalists.
Congratulations to all the students who will benefit from the scholarship dollars raised at our Black History Month luncheon, honoring black legends in LA media.
Welcome forward. It's Areva Martin in real time. I'm Avi Bernard in for Areva Martin today, and I'm very pleased to be joined by Michael Imhotep, who is a researcher, historian, radio show host, and he is the founder of the African History Network. His website is theafricanhistorynetwork.com, just filled with knowledge and always teaching about our history. Really appreciate you being here, Michael. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for having me, Avi. It's good to be here back on Areva Martin in real time.
Always great to have you. So Juneteenth was this week, just a few days ago. And
yes.
I want to start by asking you, what were your thoughts on the celebrations that you either were part of or that you saw? What do you think of the caliber of Juneteenth celebrations this year as far as, kind of staying focused on the purpose of Juneteenth?
Well, first of all, I live in Detroit, and I monitored celebrations in Detroit. There were more celebrations in Detroit, in the Metro Detroit area, than I've ever seen before. I spoke at 3 or 4 different celebrations in Detroit, in the Metro Detroit area. I read numerous articles about Juneteenth this year, 2023. I also watched a lot of news media coverage, especially cable news, on Juneteenth. So the fact that African Americans are coming together on this federal holiday, celebrating Juneteenth, learning more about the history is extremely important. But as I always say, we have to correct the history of Juneteenth and protect the history of Juneteenth. Number one, there's a lot of misinformation floating around about Juneteenth and its history, about the Emancipation Proclamation, things of this nature. And a lot of it is coming from mainstream media. It could be coming from MSNBC, CNN. For instance, I saw the Rachel Maddow show, and not to pick on Rachel, but she said that the enslaved Africans in Galveston, Texas, learned 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation that they were free. And she only read part of General Order Number 3, which was issued June 19th, 1865, by Major General Gordon Granger. And a lot of the news media falls into this trap. They stop at the part where it says all slaves are free. They skip over the part where Major General Gordon Granger went on to say that those enslaved Africans should stay on the plantations and seek wages from their former slave owners, and they should not roam the roads. They should not run behind Union lines, things of this nature. And one of the biggest mistakes that happens, and I see this over and over again, whether it's the Washington Post, New York Times, whether it's Amber Ruffin's show, we still operate under this fifth grade mentality that the Emancipation Proclamation that President Abraham Lincoln issued January 1st, 1863, freed the slaves. It did not. What legally frees the enslaved Africans, what ends chattel slavery, is when the 13th Amendment is ratified December 6, 1865 by Georgia, and Georgia became the 27th state to ratify the 13th Amendment. So the way the narrative goes, they say, well, these enslaved Africans found out basically 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation that they were free. But what mainstream media doesn't say is that Kentucky and Delaware did not abolish slavery until December 6, 1865, which was 6 months after Juneteenth. Okay. When we look at Maryland, Maryland did not abolish slavery until November 1st, 1864. They had to put it on the ballot. Okay. And it almost did not pass. Well, that's almost 2 years after Juneteenth. Tennessee did not abolish slavery until February 22nd, 1865. That's 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, 4 months before Juneteenth. So one of the biggest myths about Juneteenth is that it was the last day of slavery. It was not. It clearly was not. Kentucky and Delaware did not legally end slavery until December 6, 1865, 6 months later. So this misinformation is allowed to permeate because Americans are very ignorant of history. So Juneteenth becoming a federal holiday gives us an opportunity, one, to correct the history of Juneteenth, protect the history of Juneteenth, and to force into a national conversation a history that Republicans are passing laws, especially in former Confederate states, to suppress the teaching of this history, but also to teach the history, also to teach the need of repairing the damage of a legacy of 246 years of slavery, decades of Jim Crow segregation, redlining, federal policies that harmed African Americans, et cetera, what we call collectively reparations or reparative justice.
You have made several good points that I want to touch on there.
Okay.
Well, firstly, saying that Americans are very ignorant to history, and a lot of that ignorance is willful, as you just stated. States like Florida, they're intentionally trying to ban the accurate teaching of Black history, and it's very disturbing to see. And what I wanted to follow up with you on was, though, so you said that it was Kentucky and Delaware, right, that didn't abolish slavery until December of 1865?
December 6, 1865, yeah. Tennessee didn't abolish it to February 1865, 4 months before Juneteenth. And just very quickly, the Emancipation Proclamation gave exemptions for territories that came back into the Union or territories that stayed loyal to the Union. Maryland, Missouri, Kentucky, and Delaware were the border states. They were exempt from the Emancipation Proclamation. They were allowed to keep their slaves. Tennessee came back into the Union in 1862. They were allowed to keep their slaves. And the Emancipation Proclamation basically stated that the territories in rebellion, those slaves would be freed if those territories did not come back into the Union by January 1st, 1863. But the Union had no legal authority to dictate to the Confederacy to do anything because those 11 states of the Confederacy seceded from the Union and set up their own government.
Yeah, they were no longer part of the United States at that time.
Right. This is why it's important to read these documents. You can go to archives.gov, which is the U.S. National Archives, or LOC.gov, which is the Library of Congress, and all these historical documents we can read. U.S. Constitution, Emancipation Proclamation. We can read all these documents, General Order Number 3, so we get a better understanding of them, as well as the Presidential Record Act of 1978 as well. You can read that there too at archives.gov.
We're talking to historian, researcher, radio host, and founder of the African History Network, Michael Imhotep. So, Michael, when Kentucky and Delaware did finally ban slavery on December 6, 1865, I'm sure that all of the slave owners weren't automatically like, okay, well, bye guys, you're free now. So I'm sure it took a while for all of the slaves to all of the enslaved individuals to be released or to actually experience their freedom. Do we know definitively what the actual last day of slavery was?
Well, keep in mind, it took military force to do this. Those territories had to be brought back into the Union. It took military force. If we look at example for Texas, June 19th was not the day that all 250,000 enslaved Africans in Texas got the word of General Order Number 3. It takes Major General Gordon Granger and his troops almost a year to go throughout Texas and physically bring Texas back into the Union and enforce it, okay? We know also there are going to be some slave owners in Texas that keep their enslaved Africans to 1866 at least, okay? And then we also know there's some Native American nations like the Cherokee, the 5 civilized tribes of Native Americans, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole Indians. Some of them are going to keep their slaves to 1866, 1867, which is why you had those Black Freedmen Indian treaties of 1866 between those Native American nations and the federal government. But you're going to have military force that brings this about, and many enslaved Africans, they're going to run away from the plantations when we get the word, either Juneteenth in 1865 or December 6, 1865. These various periods of time, we're going to run away from the plantation, run behind Union lines. Even though they told us don't run behind Union lines, we're still going to run away from the plantation also. So we see it come in phases. April 16th, 1862, freedom comes in Washington, D.C. And this is why, even to this day, they celebrate Emancipation Day on April 16th in Washington, D.C., which is why the tax income deadline fell on April 17th this year, because April 16th was a federal holiday. It was Emancipation Day in Washington, D.C. So we're going to see this fall at different periods of time. But we know the last day of chattel slavery being legal is made illegal officially December 6, 1865, when the 13th Amendment is amended, is ratified, when the 13th Amendment is ratified and the U.S. Constitution is amended.
So in tying Juneteenth into reparations, how do we kind of facilitate Juneteenth or use Juneteenth as a tool to teach about reparations?
Well, we teach about this history, what happens after slavery ends. We teach about the Reconstruction era. We bring all this history, the voter suppression, the domestic terrorism, the theft of land. We connect all this to the structural inequities that exist today. The racial wealth gap, 8-to-1, the median household wealth of a white family, $188,000 compared to $24,000 for an African-American family, is not because white people work 8 times harder. Is not because they're 8 times smarter. It's because they had the help of the federal government. There were massive land giveaways like the Homestead Act of 1862 that gave away 270 million acres of land, and they gave away land for 124 years from 1862 to 1976. This was by Congress. African Americans are largely locked out of this massive land giveaway, even though we worked the land largely for free for 246 years. When we look at today, June 22nd, this is the anniversary of President Franklin Roosevelt, June 22nd, 1944, signing into law was called the GI Bill. The GI Bill gave low interest loans to World War II veterans to buy homes, go to college, go to trade school, and to start businesses. Well, African-American veterans, they earn those benefits, but many of them are going to be discriminated against and not be able to take advantage of these benefits that they earned and their taxpayer dollars paid for. And the GI Bill is one of the main policies in the 20th century that has increased the racial wealth gap. It changed who got to go to college. These World War II veterans are able to buy homes in the newly formed suburbs, and we're being discriminated against because of redlining, restrictive covenants, things of this nature, these various policies. So when we talk about this history and we talk about what these laws and policies that created the racial wealth gaps, then we can talk about the need for repairing the damage of this history, not just for 246 years of slavery, but what happened after slavery ends today and these laws and policies that continue to inflict the harm on African Americans today.
Yeah, one thing that I think not enough people can appreciate is the significance of redlining.
Yes.
And how that was such an extreme barrier to generational wealth building. I mean, you're talking about people who are alive today, who are either were not allowed to buy a home themselves, or their descendants are still suffering the consequences of their ancestor their mother or father or grandparent not being able to buy a home. I mean, that one thing right there, that one policy affected so many people and so many families and so many generations in such a profound way. And I just wanted to see if you can kind of just talk about that a little bit more, about redlining and how that has really held back so many Black families from building wealth.
Well, absolutely. And redlining comes into existence about 1937, and you have you have real estate developers and banks that they draw red lines. They take a map and they draw red lines around areas in what we would call the inner city. And after World War II, they start building the suburbs. And you have the U.S. Interstate Highway Acts in 1952 and 1956 that drive 41,000 miles of interstate highway all throughout the country. They run through about 1,600 African-American communities and displace our businesses, displace our homes. And banks are denying loans to African-Americans in those areas with the red lines drawn around them. These red areas are looked at as higher risk. And then when we try to use the benefits that we earn from the GI Bill, we try to take advantage of these loan programs from the federal government, from the Federal Housing Association, things like this. We're discriminated against in moving to the suburbs, which greatly impacts our ability to acquire an asset, acquire a home, and pass on generational wealth to our children and our grandchildren. Also, when we look at something like the fact that African-American homes are valued at $48,000, on average, $48,000 less than a comparable white home. The Brookings Institute, Andre Perry, has extensive research on this. This adds up to $156 billion in less value that African-American homes have, okay? There was a study from Citigroup Bank. CBS News has this article from September 2020 that talks about how the U.S. economy has lost $16 trillion because of racism, just in a 20-year period of time from the year 2000 to 2019. And it cited the fact that they looked at African Americans not being able to get loans to go to college, not being able to get loans to start businesses, and also being discriminated when it comes to buying homes. And it also goes on to say that if these policies were corrected, in the next 5 years, the U.S. economy can grow by $5 trillion. And one of the most important things to talk about when we deal with these structural inequities, and what this study from Citigroup shows, is how racism negatively impacts everyone in America. Even though the brunt of the harm is directed towards African Americans, the policies that are good for African Americans, like student loan forgiveness, are also good for America. So when we talk about repairing the damage, we also have to talk about how is good, not just for African Americans, but other people, how it's good for America to have this repair to justice, because the majority of the people that have to vote on these policies are white. In the U.S. House of Representatives, U.S. Senate, let's be honest, the majority of the people that have to vote on these policies are white. So we also have to talk about how this benefits other people.
Well, it's such a good point. People need to know that racism doesn't just affect the people you're being racist towards. It affects all of us. And
racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race, which comes out of the ideology of European white supremacy. Racism occurs when one race of people control the majority of the wealth, power, resources, privileges, benefits, land, access to education, access to opportunity, jobs, media, etc. And they use that to marginalize, subordinate, and do harm to another race of people. Racism is not a feeling. It's not about not liking people. It's about a power structure.
Absolutely. Before we run out of time, though, Michael, I want to talk about your course. You have a 12-week online history course that starts this Saturday. Can you talk to us about that?
June 24th, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, ancient Kemet, one of the original names for Egypt, the Moors, and the Ma'afa. The Ma'afa is a Kiswahili term, which means the Great Disaster, which is our Holocaust. This deals with understanding the transatlantic slave trade. We deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. We deal with ancient Africa, Nubia, ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt. We deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the African Moors, who take the teachings from the Nile Valley region of Africa into Europe. This brings Europe out of the Dark Ages, and then we go and see what leads to the transatlantic slave trade taking place, so we can better understand the history of the day. So it's a 12-week online course. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime. A year from now, 2 years from now, you can watch the entire class. It's very visual. I do a PowerPoint presentation. There's about 80 to 100 articles we reference. People can register at our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. They can also call us, 312 313-462-0003, 313-462-0003, 313-462-0003. And this information, the class is PG-13, so you can use this with your youth as well, with the children.
The AfricanHistoryNetwork.com.
Yes.
Michael, always a pleasure having you. And
Hey, Avi, thanks. Tell Areva I said hi, too.
I will do that. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
And when we come forward, we are going to be talking to presidential historian Larry Cook about the historic nature of the president's son, Hunter Biden, agreeing to plead guilty to misdemeanor tax charges. Has offspring of a sitting president ever been charged with a crime before or ever pleaded guilty to a crime? Has a sitting president ever lost re-election and then run for president again? I feel like if you go back through the years, every president who loses election, they kind of go away. And I'm going to get some more clarity on that from our presidential historian, Larry Cook, when we come forward right after news, traffic, and sports right here on KBLA Talk 1580.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a rest bar,
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
The bounce is back.
Here comes the brand new flavor in your head.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show, weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head.
This is a rather bold pronouncement, but we think we can back it up. If you come across a radio frequency anywhere putting more variety and more diversity on the air than KBLA Talk 1580, we sure would like to hear about your discovery.
You got to have vision.
You can search, but we are confident that you won't find more shows covering more topics, hosted by a more diverse and inclusive lineup of talkers than the squad we have assembled here at KBLA Talk 1580.
This is the time, brothers. This is the time.
We've got something for everybody.
That's right.
Health and healing, history and humor, issues and events, empowerment and entertainment, all in one station.
What's really going on?
Free enterprise, you dig?
KBLA Talk 1580.
Yes.
Oh yeah. We got a lot to talk about.
King Kong ain't got on me.
If you're not listening to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings on KBLA Talk 1580, you're missing out. Everybody wants to talk to Tavis.
That's one reason, by the way, why I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with you today. The three people I always most hoped would interview me were Phil Donahue, Studs Terkel, and Tavis Smiley. Donahue's retired, Terkel's deceased, so this is a real thrill for me. And the reason why I have such respect for what you do is you have a historically informed conversation of depth and detail.
Be sure to tune in to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings, 9 a.m. to 12 noon on your unapologetically progressive radio station, KBLA Talk 1580. KBLA Talk 1580.
Is the pen mightier than the sword?
They say the pen is mightier than the sword. At KBLA Talk 1580, we not only have a lot to talk about, we have a lot to write about. Politics, relationships, business, empowerment, and culture. The all-star roster at KBLA Talk 1580 has you covered.
That's what it's all about.
Be sure to follow us on all our socials for our latest book releases, op-eds, essays, and commentaries from our hosts. And, of course, download the KBLA 1580 app as we strive to remain your most trusted, credible, and reliable source for the issues you care about. This is unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
What up, baby?
There are millions of boys and girls who are young, gifted, and black.
I'm young, gifted,
With a
and black.
golden tag, and that's a fact.
And
KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
Hey there, I'm Jared Hill, president of the National Association of Black Journalists of Los Angeles, and I just want to say thank you for the benevolent $10,000 donation in scholarships for the next generation of black journalists.
And I'm Haywood Galbraith, photojournalist and founder of the Minority Photojournalism Institute. Thanks, KBLA, for your generous $10,000 scholarship gift to help us train the next generation of black photojournalists.
Congratulations to all the students who will benefit from the scholarship dollars raised at our Black History Month luncheon, honoring black legends in LA media. When we come forward at KBLA Talk 1580, we're bringing everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us.
Connection established.
Access granted.
In a survey conducted by the public opinion research firm Eviderus, KBLA Talk 1580 consistently emerged as the station of choice for black audiences in the Los Angeles media market and beyond. The survey also revealed that the vast majority of black audiences are concerned about the lack of black-owned media and are more likely to listen to talk radio that focuses on issues that impact the black community. For some reason, the other talk stations haven't quite figured that out.
If you think about KFI, well, KFI only has like a 3% black listenership. 3%. So there's a good 97% out there to support a station like KBLA.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black. Your black. Your black.
Follow the leader.
KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram at KBLA 1580.
Follow the leader.
Are you ready?
The station leading the way with exclusive interviews,
Follow the leader.
stimulating conversation, and intellectual discourse that empowers, enlightens, and informs.
Follow the leader.
Follow the leader at KBLA 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Keep following the leader.
Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a rest bar, shot with a rest bar, shot with a rest bar.
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
Avi Bernard in for Areva Martin today, and we are joined by presidential historian Larry Cook. I'm very glad to have you back on the show, Larry. Thanks for being here.
Oh, it's an honor to be back on. Thank you.
All right, so I really want to talk to you because Hunter Biden has agreed to plead guilty to misdemeanor tax charges, and it just got me thinking. This is going to be quite a distraction for Joe Biden. His love for his son Hunter is well documented. He has lost children. He lost his son, Beau Biden. He lost a daughter much earlier in life. And so Hunter means a lot to him. And Hunter has some personal struggles. And now Hunter has pleaded guilty. And so it just got me thinking, have any other offspring of sitting presidents ever been charged with a crime or pleaded guilty to a crime?
Well, the answer is yes, but nothing as serious as Hunter. Jenna and Barbara Bush, both when their father was president, they faced a misdemeanor charge of underage drinking and using a false ID to obtain alcohol. So outside of them, not too much. Neil Bush, when his father, George H.W. Bush, was president, he got into some problem, but nothing criminal. But it was some banking issues that went against the regulations. He was actually sued by the federal regulators, but it didn't get to. They reached an agreement before it got to any criminal charges. So those are about the only two that come to my mind anyway.
And so that's for a sitting president. How about for any former president? Has any former president ever had their children or any other relatives, for that matter, in serious legal jeopardy?
Yeah, a couple of examples there. Again, nothing as serious as the Hunter Biden case, but Amy Carter was arrested for protesting twice after her father left the White House in 1985 and in 1987.
Carter, right? Jimmy Carter's daughter.
Yeah, President Carter's daughter, Amy. And so she got two minor arrests there, as I mentioned, in 85 and 87. Bill Clinton's brother, I believe it was in 2001, shortly after President Clinton left the White House, his brother got a DUI. That was later pleaded down to reckless driving, I think, or something like that. But those are those are a couple examples there. Yeah.
And no, so I don't know if you know the answer to this question. If you don't, it's okay. It just came into my head. But we've seen Donald Trump use the power of the pardon in many cases, what people would describe in a very unethical way. And has any president ever come into office and then been able to pardon their family members? I know presidents have pardoned friends. Well, Trump pardoned his friends, but
sure.
Has any president ever been able to pardon a family member for a crime that they maybe had committed before they got into the White House?
I'm not familiar with any. I wouldn't mind answering the question if any came to my mind. I'm not none come to my mind. Pretty much a lot of the pardons too by a sitting president. Of course, it has to be a sitting president to pardon, but come at the end of their term, really more so than in the beginning or during their term. But none of them come to my mind for a relative on that.
Gotcha. Understood. All right. And so I imagine it's really tough to run for president regardless, not even counting the millions and billions now of money you have to raise, but just the grind of being on the campaign trail every single day, doing 3 or 4 events in a day in different cities and states, constantly being on the road. It seems like a very tough thing to do, even in the absolute best circumstances. But when you're President Biden or anyone else, and you have a relative, and especially a son, who is now going through some serious legal trouble, that's got to be a big distraction. And it got me thinking, I wonder if there have what other distractions presidential candidates have had to deal with that may have been noteworthy. So maybe I don't know. Obviously we talked about the arrests and things like that, but what are some of the biggest distractions that presidential candidates have had to deal with?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love that question. And I love how you led into it, too, because what you said about just being president and then having to campaign for re-election, just being president itself is a distraction. I mean, that's an awesome job. And so I appreciate your lead in with that question. But yeah, there's 5 or 6 examples that come to my mind right away with that through history. Of course, you had Abraham Lincoln. He was dealing with the Civil War. At the time, he's trying to get reelected. I mean, I can't think of anything any more serious than that. But he was right in the midst of that, and then trying to get reelected, which certainly was secondary for him. He didn't really think he was going to get reelected. He really thought he might not. Another one, we'll kind of go in chronological order here as they come to my mind. But Benjamin Harrison, when he was between the 2 terms of Grover Cleveland, and when he was trying to get reelected, his wife was dying in the White House, and she actually died on October 25th, 1892, about 2 weeks before Election Day. So you can just imagine how difficult that was for President Harrison, again, running a campaign. Back then, the presidents didn't campaign as much like they do now, for themselves, but still he was in the midst of the campaign. Of course, you got FDR, who was dealing with World War II, and he got elected 4 times, so he dealt with it a couple of times during his presidency. You have Nixon, who the Watergate scandal was in 1972 coming up. Didn't really ramp up until after he was elected, but he was dealing with the onslaught of the Watergate situation. You got President Carter, who again was dealing with an awesome problem with the Iranian hostage crisis, and he's right there in the campaign that whole time with that going on, and having to deal with that and not really campaigning much at all because of that. And then our most recent example would be in 2020 with President Trump during COVID. Being a candidate during COVID wasn't easy for either candidate, not in that situation.
Unbelievable historical perspective. I mean, you don't even think about these things sometimes, thinking about Abraham Lincoln having to deal with the Civil War and running for re-election at the same time. And then FDR, obviously, before term limits were enacted, he gets elected 4 times. And he probably would have got elected another time if he hadn't died in office. But it's just unbelievable historic perspective there. Larry, do you think which one of those would you? I mean, it's impossible to say for sure, but just in your opinion, which one of those is the biggest distraction? You got Lincoln dealing with the Civil War, you got Harrison dealing with the death of his wife, you've got FDR dealing with World War II. And you've got Nixon dealing with Watergate, and which is obviously a self-inflicted distraction. And then you've got Donald Trump dealing with COVID. Which one of those would you put at the top of the list as the biggest distraction a president has ever had to face during a re-election campaign?
And the other one that I mentioned was Jimmy Carter dealing with the Iranian hostage situation too. But if I had to pick one from those that I mentioned, I would have to choose Abraham Lincoln as probably the most, with the potential for being the most distracted anyway. I mean, that in that situation, our country was at stake, whether we were going to even have a country. And he was trying to save the country where, like President Carter was trying to save the hostages. COVID was, of course, a big deal for everybody, but it wasn't a divide of the country in the way that Lincoln, had to deal with it. Benjamin Harrison, it was a personal tragedy in his life, and as you mentioned about Nixon and FDR was just kind of going with the flow there, and getting reelected. So I would have to pick Abraham Lincoln is my choice for the most difficult distraction.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you because for me, before you started going into that, I was thinking it has to be out of Lincoln and FDR because just these 2 massive wars. But I think in the case of FDR, the country was probably very united in dealing with that war as a complete polar opposite of the Civil War, in which you can't possibly have a more divided country than if half of it decides that they don't want to be in the country anymore, and then you still have to run for re-election. How did that, just if you can just refresh my memory on the timeline of how that worked with Lincoln's reelection, at what point in the war the war was still going on when the votes were cast, is that correct?
Yeah, the war was still going on, and it was starting to turn a little better for the North, at that time around election time. But yeah, it was very much going on. And as Lincoln was assassinated very early on in his second term, because back then you didn't get inaugurated until March. The inaugurations were in March. So he was elected in November, but, inaugurated in March, and then of course assassinated in April. And that's when he got inaugurated, is when the war was, coming to a close right at that same time.
That is a long lame duck period. My word. I'm glad they changed that from March to January. That is a super long time for a president to have to wait to actually get in power. Obviously, not if you're an incumbent, but just if you're just getting elected and you have to wait 5 months, that is a long time. Oh my God.
It is. Yeah. They had it that way because because of the times when it took people a long time to get to Washington, D.C. just think about Lincoln in his first term. He had to come from Springfield, Illinois to get to Washington. And, we didn't have automobiles and that type of thing then. Of course, we had trains and stuff, but it just took people longer to get there. And as you mentioned, for an incumbent, they were already there, but a lot of other people had to get to Washington from all over for the inauguration. So that was the reason that as technology progressed, then it was put to January.
Now this is kind of an aside. I'm just curious, but how did that work since the South technically was not part of the country at that time? They didn't vote in that election, right? Or did they?
Parts of the South did. Parts of the South did. Of course, they had already established themselves as their own country. The Confederacy was their own country. So in the well-established parts of the South, they didn't, but there would be, like some parts in Maryland or what we now know as of West Virginia, things like that I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that there were areas in those areas that did vote, but not the entire South. Is correct, because they had established themselves they had seceded and established themselves as their own country and had elected Jefferson Davis as their president.
That's really remarkable to think about that. People in West Virginia and Maryland not technically being part of the United States, but still being able to vote for president of the United States. That is fascinating. When we come forward, though, I do want to ask you, Larry, about the historic nature of Donald Trump running after losing election as the nominee. Obviously, people who lose the election for president run again all the time. But I feel like once you get to be the nominee and then you lose, I feel like it's very rare to run again after that. So I can't wait to ask you about that when we come forward right here on KBLA Talk 1580.
If you're not listening to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings on KBLA Talk 1580, you're missing out. Everybody wants to talk to Tavis.
That's one reason, by the way, why I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with you today. The three people I always most hoped would interview me were Phil Donahue, Studs Terkel, and Tavis Smiley. Donahue's retired, Terkel's deceased, so this is a real thrill for me. And the reason why I have such respect for what you do is you have a historically informed conversation of depth and detail.
Be sure to tune in to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings, 9 a.m. to 12 noon on your unapologetically progressive radio station, KBLA Talk 1580. KBLA Talk 1580.
Is the pen mightier than the sword?
They say the pen is mightier than the sword. At KBLA Talk 1580, we not only have a lot to talk about, we have a lot to write about. Politics, relationships, business, empowerment, and culture. The all-star roster at KBLA Talk 1580 has you covered.
That's what it's all about.
Be sure to follow us on all our socials for our latest book releases, op-eds, essays, and commentaries from our hosts. And, of course, download the KBLA 1580 app as we strive to remain your most trusted, credible, and reliable source for the issues you care about. This is unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
What up, baby?
There are millions of boys and girls who are young, gifted, and black.
I'm young, gifted, and black.
And that's a fact.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
Hey there, I'm Jared Hill, president of the National Association of Black Journalists of Los Angeles, and I just want to say thank you for the benevolent $10,000 donation and scholarships for the next generation of black journalists.
And I'm Haywood Galbraith, photojournalist and founder of the Minority Photojournalism Institute. Thanks, KBLA, for your generous $10,000 scholarship gift to help us train the next generation of black photojournalists.
Congratulations to all the students who will benefit from the scholarship dollars raised at our Black History Month luncheon, honoring black legends in LA media. When we come forward at KBLA Talk 1580, we're bringing everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us.
Connection established.
Access granted.
In a survey conducted by the public opinion research firm Eviderus, KBLA Talk 1580 consistently emerged as the station of choice for black audiences in the Los Angeles media market and beyond. The survey also revealed that the vast majority of black audiences are concerned about the lack of black-owned media and are more likely to listen to talk radio that focuses on issues that impact the black community. For some reason, the other talk stations haven't quite figured that out.
If you think about KFI, well, KFI only has like a 3% black listenership. 3%. So there's a good 97% out there to support a station like KBLA.
At KBLA Talk.
It's Areva Martin in real time. I'm Avi Bernard in for Areva tonight. And we're talking to presidential historian Larry Cook. Okay, Larry, so, I was thinking about this, and I'm not sure if this has happened, and I hope you can provide some perspective. I feel like when a person has been chosen as a party's nominee, whether it's the president, whether it's Democrat or Republican, and they lose that race for president, once they've been named the nominee, I don't think they usually run after that, at least in recent memory. So if we go back after, John McCain ran for president many times. He lost to President Obama in 2008. He never ran again after that. Mitt Romney never ran again after losing in 2012. And even if we go back before that to Al Gore losing in 2000, never ran again after that. John Kerry losing in 2004, never ran again after that. 2016, Hillary Clinton loses to Trump. She's obviously not going to run again now. And so help me out here. Trump was elected in 2016. He loses in 2020. He's running again. And it feels like it's pretty uncommon, at least in the last 20 years, for this to happen. What about before that?
Yeah, recently it is uncommon, but it has happened. Grover Cleveland did that and was the only one to be successful at doing that. He ran and became president in 1884. The 1888 election, he was challenged by Benjamin Harrison, who we were talking about a little while ago. Harrison won the election. Frances Cleveland, who was first lady at the time, told the White House staff, don't change too much in the White House because we'll be back in 4 years. And and they did just that. They ran, Grover ran in 1892 and won the election and defeated Harrison. So he's the only one to have done it successfully. There have been a couple others that have thrown their hat back in the ring as third parties. Millard Fillmore in 1856, but he did that in what they called the Know Nothing Party, or the formal name was the American Party. He threw his hat in the ring, and it was kind of funny because he was on a trip in Europe, and he had gotten a meeting with the Pope, and he was meeting with the Pope, and at that same time he was meeting with the Pope, he was notified that he was the Know Nothing Party candidate, and or better known as the American Party, and they were a very anti-Catholic party. And so he was really afraid that was going to hurt him during the election. But he was a third party candidate, didn't win anyway. Buchanan ended up winning that. And then, of course, you got Teddy Roosevelt in 1912. He ran on the Bull Moose Party as a third party candidate. He made a political blunder when he was, he came in upon the assassination of William McKinley, served out in 1901, served out McKinley's term, ran on his own in 1904, but told the nation that he would not run for another term after that. And even his wife told him, you made a big mistake saying that. And when it got to 1912, he realized he had made that mistake, or actually in 1908, he realized he had made that mistake, but Taft came in because he was kind of Roosevelt's pick to come in, and Roosevelt made him president, actually, and then he fell out of favor with Taft over Taft's policies and decided that he would run on a third-party ticket, and of course formed the Bull Moose Party in 1912, but was unsuccessful in getting reelected. He tried for the nomination, but he was very dismayed when he did not get the Republican nomination, but he challenged the incumbent president for that.
You are an absolute encyclopedia. So it sounds like it's been over 100 years since someone even tried this, right?
Yeah, I would say that's the last one I can really think of that had been president and tried to jump back in, if my memory's serving me right. Yeah.
All right, Larry, before we run out of time, I want to talk about what I believe is your most recent book, Symbols of Patriotism, First Ladies and Daughters of the American Revolution. Tell us about your book. We have about a minute.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's just that, Symbols of Patriotism, First Ladies, Daughters of the American Revolution. It profiles the 12 First Ladies that were and are members of the Daughters of the American Revolution. Of course, Rosalind Carter and Laura Bush, they're in the book and they're still alive. That's why I say were and are. The Daughters of the American Revolution are a great patriotic national organization that, and I just thought it would be a great way to put these 12 First Ladies all under one cover. I profile all 12, and the kind of, when I was writing the book, it kind of took on an angle that I didn't expect is how influential these First Ladies and other First Ladies were in helping their husband become president and helping him to be a successful president once he got there. So, but I did a profile in each one of these 12 First Ladies in the book, and I also did the genealogy research to find their patriot ancestor that would allow them to be a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution.
And where can people get the book?
Well, people could get a signed copy directly from me by going to my website at www.larrycookhistorian.com. And if you go on there and you can click on order book, and I'll get the book order and be glad to send out a signed copy.
Larry Cook, presidential historian, thank you so much for your perspective. It's always great to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Avi. I appreciate the opportunity to be on.
Our pleasure, and we will hopefully talk to you soon. Coming up next, it is the Raw Report with Robin Ayers. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Avi Bernard, and I am gone.
Here comes the brand new flavor in your head.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show, weekdays from 2 to 4, only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Marger said a robotic sub found parts of the missing Titan 16